Hi everyone, I'm Irk, and this is Get Irked, my channel where I teach you how to invest and build wealth for the long term. In this video, I'm going to show you how to calculate property cash flow, so you can determine if you should keep your house as a rental property or if you should sell it when you buy a new one. Before we get started, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Wait, no more puns, I promise. First, I am not a real estate professional. You'll want to consult with your financial planner, a realtor, and potentially a real estate lawyer to make sure owning rental properties fits with your risk appetite and investment goals. Second, in this video, we're going to assume that you're buying a new primary residence and are trying to determine whether to sell your old house or rent it. Accordingly, we're also assuming that you have a strong financial foundation in order to afford to own two houses, and that you aren't taking on too much risk and potentially putting yourself and your family in a dire financial situation should anything go wrong. Third, this video is focusing on determining whether your house is worth renting in your market. If you do decide to make the leap into owning rental properties, you will want to consult with a lawyer to see if you should create a limited liability corporation or LLC to ensure you have enough insurance and to make sure all of your legal ducks are in a row before you go ahead. Are we good with all that? Great, let's get to it. Our first step to calculate if your property can generate positive cash flow is to determine how much your house costs you each month. Remember to include all of your monthly costs, not just your mortgage payment. Let's use my house as an example. Each month, I pay a monthly mortgage payment, which includes both the principal and interest at $1,200, property taxes of $388, insurance of $46, other fees of $25, and regular maintenance, that's also $25. My total out-of-pocket costs each month come to $1,684, which will round up to $1,700 for easier calculations. Next, you need to determine what a fair rent for your house would be in your market. We're going to use Zillow's Fair Rent Calculator, which I will link to in the show notes below. In my area, Zillow suggests that I could rent my house for a range of between $2,269 and $3,089 each month. Since what I can charge for rent exceeds my out-of-pocket costs, my property is referred to as cash flow positive. Cash flow positive means I will end up with a profit from my rental property after I pay the monthly costs for my property. According to Zillow, my net profits could be between $569 to $1,405. In addition to providing a rental range, Zillow also offers a specific rent estimate somewhere in that range that they think would be fairly valued. In the case of my home, Zillow suggested $2,734 a month. For simplicity, let's round that down to $2,700. It's important to remember that the positive cash flow you earn from renting a property isn't all income. Since you're the landlord, you're responsible for fixing anything that might break in the house, which is included in the lease, such as heating and air conditioning systems, water heaters, any appliances that are included, and repairs could get expensive. Accordingly, you're going to want to save some or even all of the extra cash flow you earn to pay for any repairs or other issues that might arise. The Rental Income Podcast has a few different approaches that different landlords take. For more details, I've linked the full article in the show notes below, but let's take a look at a few examples. Some property owners follow the 50% rule, keeping 50% of the cash flow each month as a reserve for repairs. For example, since my house generates $1,000 in cash flow, if I use the 50% rule, I should set $500 aside each month in a dedicated account for potential repairs. Other landlords will save 1% of the property's value for potential repairs. Since the house in our example is worth $450,000, that would mean keeping $4,500 in a savings account at all times. Another approach is to save all the cash flow a property produces. For this kind of landlord, the goal is not to have cash flow right now, but to get the property paid off and then live off the cash flow when the property is owned outright. Saving all the extra cash flow could also provide additional opportunities in the future, such as buying an additional rental property. The best approach is the one that works best for you and your situation. The main priority here is for all landlords to have access to a significant cash reserve or credit line to cover the cost of significant repairs should they come up. Additionally, you may find yourself in a situation where your rental property is vacant or a tenant fails to pay rent. Since your out-of-pocket expenses don't take a vacation, keeping a significant cash reserve can help you weather these times too. The traditional way to rent a property is using a term lease, typically 1 or more years, although some owners will offer shorter term leases like 3 or 6 month leases. If your rental property is in a neighborhood with an HOA, you will want to review your covenants to ensure there aren't limitations on how short a lease term can be. Finding a tenant means advertising, taking applications, running credit and background checks, and talking with references. Once you've found a qualified tenant, the tenant signs a lease for the agreed upon time period, promising to pay the negotiated rent in addition to any other requirements set out in the lease, such as a safety deposit, pet fees, and other items. You definitely need to consult with an attorney familiar with property rentals to ensure you have all your legal bases covered when it comes to the different details in a contract, and to ensure your rental contract will stand up in a court of law should you and your tenant have a falling out or if you need to evict. Some landlords don't want the headache of managing their own properties and use a property manager firm instead. Property managers handle all aspects of advertising the property, screening potential renters, handling contracts and paperwork, collecting rent, and even scheduling repairs and maintenance. If you can find a quality property manager, they can take a lot of work out of owning a rental property. Property management fees range depending on geographic area, but in my experience, many will charge about 10% of the rental price each month. Since I plan to charge $2,700 a month rent, my property manager would charge me $270 each month, leaving me with $730 of positive cash flow. However, leases are not the only way to rent out a property. Thanks to the online property management systems like Airbnb and Vrbo, property owners can opt to rent their properties like short or extended term hotel stays. If you create a free account with either service, they will provide you with an estimate of how much a property similar to yours in a similar area might make in a year. For example, Vrbo uses your property's address and number of bedrooms and bathrooms to determine how much money it can generate. For me, Vrbo estimates my property could generate up to $37,229 a year, or about $3,100 a month. Of course, that's assuming I have no vacancies for the entire year. Airbnb uses the number of guests your property can house, plus its location to generate an estimate. Since my home could house 1 to 8 guests, which would assume my 4-bedroom house has 4 couples staying there, Airbnb estimates my home could generate between $1,687 and $3,871 a month. Both services charge property owners a service fee, typically 3% for those offering accommodations. For our example, we'll assume that 3% fee. This means I could generate up to $1,307 a month in cash flow according to Vrbo, or up to $2,055 a month from Airbnb on the high end. However, you must keep that low estimate from Airbnb in mind too. If I only made a gross return of $1,687 in a month, I'd end up cash flow negative, losing nearly $65 out of my own pocket after service fees and regular monthly expenses. Although Airbnb and Vrbo basically serve as property managers handling the collection of rent, advertising, and ensuring contracts are signed, the property owner, you, are responsible for cleaning the property after each guest leaves. Additionally, where a term lease guarantees you'll have a tenant paying rent for a set amount of time, if you use a service like Airbnb or Vrbo, your property might remain vacant more often and result in less income depending on how popular visiting your area is. If the cash flow generated by your property isn't substantial, the cost of vacancies could easily eat into a lot of your overall profits, or worse, result in you having to pay your costs out of your own pocket. So, do you rent the traditional way, or do you rent using a service like Airbnb or Vrbo? You need to make sure you make the decision that fits best with your circumstances and your property's geographical location. While rental properties are one of the absolute best ways to generate wealth, even better than the stock market most of the time, it's important to remember the potential pitfalls. If we've learned anything from 2020, it's to expect the unexpected. The federal government put laws in place making it illegal to evict renters during the lockdown. While some states provided assistance to landlords, many did not, leaving the landlords to continue paying all of the out-of-pocket expenses on their properties with no assistance, in some cases for more than a year. Even without unusual circumstances, you may find yourself in a situation where your tenant does not or cannot pay rent. If your tenant cannot afford to pay and is willing to ask for help, you can arrange a payment plan that works for both of you. However, if your tenant refuses to pay, you will have to evict your tenant, a process that can be both time-consuming and expensive depending on the laws in your area. And these are just a few examples of negative events that could affect you, which makes it that much more important that you do your research and consult with real estate professionals in your area to ensure you cover all your bases before you enter the rental real estate game. That being said, real estate offers a great many benefits, ranging from passive income generated from rent to massive tax deductions such as depreciating your rental properties on your taxes, potentially deducting all expenses related to your rental properties, and many more. Real estate experts, including Ken McElroy and Robert Kiyosaki, built their fortunes entirely on owning rental properties, making real estate a potentially more effective way of building wealth over time than even the stock market. Now that we've reviewed that your house is cash flow positive, could it still be better to sell the house and invest the money elsewhere rather than rent it out? As I said at the top of the show, we're assuming that you have financial means necessary to buy your new house, so you don't need the money from your old house. For your first option, should you roll the funds from your old house into your new house? According to Black Knight, a website that tracks real estate data, the average gain for house prices over the last 25 years has been 3.8%. Since the average gain for the S&P 500, one of the indexes that tracks the stock market, has been 7% over the same time period, you would be better served investing the money into the S&P 500 than your new house. However, would you do better to invest the money into the stock market instead of renting out your old house? Let's look at the numbers of how both investments would perform over 20 years. To make the rental property calculations, we'll continue using my house as an example. Like me, we're going to assume that you've lived in your house for some time and have already paid off some of your mortgage, since it would make no sense to buy a new primary residence and nearly immediately decide to rent it out or sell it. In my case, I've lived in my house for nearly 8 years, but I still have 272 mortgage payments remaining on the loan. My home's estimated value is $450,000 according to Zillow, and there is $221,591 remaining on the mortgage. We're going to use the rent of $2,700 a month discussed earlier. According to Million Acres, a dedicated real estate investment website run by thefool.com, the average rent increase nationally is 3 to 5%. To make sure we're planning for a worst-case scenario, we'll use the low end of the range and increase the rent 3% each year. According to Zillow, expenses on rental properties range between 37.5% to 45% of the rent. Zillow assumes expenses to include everything outside of the mortgage, which means property taxes, insurance fees, and all repairs and maintenance. Once again, planning for the worst-case scenario, we'll use the high end of the range and assume our expenses will come to 45% of our $2,700 a month rent, which means we'll start with $1,215 of expenses and we'll increase that amount by 3% annually, the same rate we're increasing our rent each year. For our comparison, we're going to manage the property ourselves rather than using a property manager, since it's a single-family house and won't require as much work as, say, an 8-unit apartment complex. For our first year, we earned $32,400 in rent, $2,700 a month times 12 months, and had $14,580 in expenses, $1,215 a month times 12 months. This leaves us $3,420 in profit. However, we have to remember we still need to pay income tax on our profit. According to taxfoundation.org, the national average for income taxes is 14.6%, with the top 1% paying 26.8%, the top 10% paying 21.5%, and so on. Once again, we'll use me as an example. My actual tax rate is 22%. However, after taking the standard deduction, my effective tax rate has averaged 14.9% for the past 5 years. We'll round that up to 15%. At the end of our first year, we've made $2,907 in net profits after taxes. Let's see what happens after 20 years with our rent increasing 3% each year and our home appreciating 3.8%. After 20 years, we will have made $162,206 in rent, and our home will be worth $914,034. Once we remove the remaining $38,400 from our mortgage, we have a total gain of $1,037,840. Let's say we sold our house for Zillow's $450,000 estimate. According to Zillow, closing costs for sellers are between 8 to 10%. In order to favor investing in stocks over real estate, let's say closing costs were 8%, which gives us more cash to invest in the stock market. After selling the house and paying off the mortgage, we'd have $192,400 to invest. Since the gains are less than $250,000, federal tax laws say that we don't have to pay income taxes on that gain. First, let's look at what we made by keeping the house and renting it out. We earned $845,440 over 20 years, or a gain of 439.42%. That's fantastic, but how would we have done if we had invested that money in the stock market? Let's put our $192,400 we received from selling the house into an index fund that closely tracks the S&P 500. To favor stocks, let's say there's no fee to that index fund. In other words, the money will earn 7% a year plus reinvested dividends at no cost. According to Y-Charts, the long-term average dividend rate for the S&P 500 is 1.87%, so our stock market investment will yield 8.87% each year. At the end of 20 years, our stock investment is worth $1,034,773. We earned $842,373, or 437.82%. The rental property earned $3,066, or 0.296% more than the stock market over 20 years. Wait, we earned almost as much from the stock market without all the work we put into renting the house? What gives? Here's the catch that comes from rental properties. Our tenants have been paying off the mortgage this whole time. In fact, we only have 32 payments left, less than 3 years, before we own the house outright. After we pay off the mortgage, that $1,200 a month mortgage payment becomes cash flow, and suddenly the rental property rockets into becoming a far better investment than the stock market, as not only do we have more passive income, the property will continue to appreciate in value over time too. Also, remember how we used the worst case scenario to calculate our rental property's income? What if we used the best case? With an expense ratio of 37.5% and a rent increase of 5% annually, our rental would have earned a total of $1,199,981 over 20 years. $165,208, or nearly 16% more than our stock investment. And that's before the mortgage on our rental property is paid off. If you can afford to keep your old house when you buy a new one, if your old house is cash flow positive, and if you want to put in the work and effort, owning rental property can truly be one of the best all-time wealth generators. Remember, I'm not a professional advisor in any way. You'll definitely want to consult with legal, financial, and real estate professionals before making any decisions about your own situation.